we've tracked 7 double-digit upsets already, Chris, in college football. And there were 18 in the Power 5 last year, and we've already got 7. And of course, depending on your line, your book that you go to, South Carolina was right on that edge, is about a 10-point dog against Kentucky. And they went in there and they just blew off their doors in the second half.
I mean, I think it speaks to a lot, Mark. We've just never known less about these teams than we do now, especially in these early season matchups, right? I mean, I think it's so hard for those in Vegas to handicap, and it's so hard for us to, predict what's going to happen. I mean, there's so much movement with the portal and NIL and rosters changing. I mean, we used to not have that, right? You used to know by early spring, okay, these are going to be the guys you probably knew for the next 3 to 4 years. This is going to kind of be the core nucleus of the team, and there's just so much movement now. It's hard to get a gauge for sure on what these teams are going to be. So, that's the thing. In the offseason, we talk about as the game suffering because of conference realignment, because of portal, because of NIL. But I could argue, Mark, the game's never been healthier, right? With the amount of upsets and competitive ball games. And it's as entertaining a product as it's ever been. Certainly South Carolina was right there, man. I mean, that was one that I took Kentucky in the game. I thought South Carolina could win, but I took Kentucky in the game. And, to see what the Gamecocks did a week after nearly losing to Old Dominion on their home field, just one of the more stunning results of the weekend.
So now we've got a LSU game coming up here that's gained a lot more focus nationally because of what South Carolina did on Saturday night. This is obviously an opportunity for South Carolina to show that they can have a competitive season, that it wasn't a fluke going to Kentucky. Maybe Kentucky's not as good a team as we thought, but now we've got a matchup against LSU. And despite what happened against USC, that was obviously a game that came down to the final play. I know LSU is a good team, and South Carolina can really show us something, of course, if they're able to pull this one out.
Yeah, it would be a huge win and a huge feather in the cap for Shane Beamer. And, all that talk of maybe his seat is warming up, or God forbid, is he going to be on the hot seat by season's end? Mark, I think all of that would virtually disappear if South Carolina is able to go out there and get a win. It's also a massive game for Brian Kelly from the LSU perspective, Mark. I mean, I've seen LSU folks go as far as to say it's the most important game of his tenure to this point. I mean, you think about some of the games they've played and, how big of a deal that is, right? To say that. I mean, they've played in some really big games since he's been there. So I think for South Carolina, they're going to have to be better offensively. I just don't think you can count on every single week the defense is going to be able to, to bail you out and go win the game. LSU, we know, is very capable offensively. They've struggled to run the football, though, which has been really interesting. I think, Mark, this is almost a battle of which offense can find balance, right? I mean, neither have been great. LSU's obviously been much better. They've got, I would say, far superior weapons to South Carolina. For South Carolina, it's can they run the football? And you're going up against an LSU front. You lose Jacoby and Guillory. There should be opportunities maybe for Rocket Sanders to have his breakout game. I do think LSU is better defensively under Blake Baker this year, but there's still so many questions with them we just don't have answers to. So the spread right now, I think, in this game is still at 7 points. I am picking LSU in this football game. I think you could consider it a coin flip, but I'm going to go with LSU. I just think in a game where explosive plays are going to matter, and I don't know that South Carolina, again, I'm saying this for the second straight week, but I just don't think they have the offense to keep up with LSU. Now, their defense is fantastic, and maybe the defense goes back out there and wins them another game, but this is their greatest test yet. I think LSU could present some problems in the vertical passing game with Kyron Lacey and the rest of those weapons they've got on the outside, CJ Daniels, Xavion Thomas. My big question is, can LSU run the football? Again, they just haven't done it at any point this season with Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams. And, that great offensive line that we talk about with LSU, who's been so good in pass pro, just have not been able to get a run push. So there's certainly a path for South Carolina to win, but I went LSU in this game 27-20. I think it'll be a really close, competitive back and forth game, but I'm going to take the Tigers to win.
When they did get a run push against USC, that was with John Emery getting much of the yardage downfield, and unfortunately he's been lost for the season. So LSU loses what was a former 5-star that looked to be finally breaking through. Brian Kelly made a comment this week that Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know if it was in some type of response defending Garrett Nussmeier during his news conference, but he said something about he's on pace to throw 45 or 50 touchdowns and we'll probably need every one of them. I don't know if that was an indictment on his defense not improving under Blake Baker, because that's what obviously was needed last year.
I mean, it's certainly, I think the defense is better. I think also maybe he's challenging the defense a little bit. But you look at them, Mark, in week one, and I know week two against Nichols, there was it was a little bit sloppy here and there. I mean, gave up a significant amount of yardage on the ground. Again, that's my biggest concern with them is just interior defensive line and the run defense as a whole. I think Harold Perkins Jr. is a fantastic player, but I think Brian Kelly likes to send messages, Mark. I think he likes to send messages to his team, and I think that was one that, here's the thing. I think that should be the mentality of LSU. Like, the defense is going to be better this year. I feel confident in saying that. Watching them week one, I mean, I think it was very easy to see that defensive product, it wasn't perfect, but it was far superior to what you had last year. But I think LSU's got to continue to stay aggressive. What was so maddening to me, Mark, in that game week one, LSU played like they had a 14-point lead the entire game. Like, they kind of they were on their heels. They weren't the aggressor. I didn't feel like they really took the fight to USC, if you will, in that game. And conservative play calling in the second half. Like, I think that's what LSU needs to be, is very aggressive. Again, pushing the football down the field, asking Garrett Nussmeier to go out there and, like Brian Kelly said, throw 40 touchdowns, right? If he needs to do it, he needs to do it. But I think that's going to be the best version of LSU. They've got to play as the aggressor, Mark, because, again, their backs are against the wall. I mean, you talk about a 12-team college football playoff. They lose this game to South Carolina, you can virtually count them out. They've still got Ole Miss on the schedule. They've still got Alabama on the schedule. They've still got Texas A&M on the road on the schedule where they struggle to win. So you got to have this South Carolina game to have any shot at the college football playoff. And I think the way LSU wins this game is they've got to be the aggressor. They cannot be passive.
Yeah, you're alluding to a situation in that game. There was about 7 or 8 minutes left, and LSU had a one-score lead, and it looked like they were just about to put their foot on the throat. And they had a couple opportunities to make it a 2-score game. And nobody's ever confused USC with being a mentally tough team in recent years. And they weren't able to get the job done. And for a third consecutive year, Brian Kelly loses an opening game. We got Chris Phillips on the line from SEC Unfiltered. Chris, what's going on there at SEC Unfiltered these days?
We're staying busy, man. Obviously, in the season, we're dropping all of our game previews early in week. I do a weekly Monday call-in show as well, noon to 1. That's a lot of fun, taking questions, comments, calls. We're staying active on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content. We're there constantly pumping out content. The podcast, YouTube, like I mentioned, staying active. It's a lot of game previews. It's a lot of reaction stuff. My good friend Dave Shoemate, who's one of our contributors, he goes live on Monday and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. Saturday, we do reactions to all of the big games. So you'll see us live on Saturdays as well. And then Sunday mornings, we're doing our Sunday Fun Day reaction show, about an hour 15 or so at 10 a.m. Eastern, or right around that time. So, Mark, we're staying busy, as I'm sure you are. It's a lot of fun, man. It's a lot of content bleeding out of the eyeballs, like I say. But it's a great time, man. And we're actually getting to talk football on the field and break down games. And again, as you know, we wait so long to do that, so we're enjoying every second of it.